And we start. I'll invite Piri to open us with karakia, please.
Kia ora tātou. I'll start with our karakia first. It'll be whakataka te hau, well familiar to us all. And then after that, I would like to do a mihi, because I understand that we have had two significant losses in amongst us. And so I'll be doing that as well. And I'll just give you a bit of an intro because it's a participative part to our meeting this morning. So kia ora tātou, our karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru.
You didn't see the code you started?
I'll just check. Someone's got their, hasn't got mute on.
Yeah.
Is that Jedith? Right, let's begin. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta. Kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi a ke ana te ata kura. He teo, he huka, he hauhu, tihei Maori ora. Now our mihi. In the mihi, you will hear me acknowledge Des Ratima, ONZM, who passed away during lockdown. And also I want to acknowledge the passing of Michelle's father-in-law, Sonny. And so in the mihi this morning, you'll hear me mention their names or replace those with rangatira. And you'll also hear me make references to Pūtahi Nui a Rehua, which is a poroporoaki or a eulogy in regards to these two particular rangatira. So my acknowledgement to you in the first instance, Michelle, for the loss in your whānau. And I think to all of us who met and knew and worked alongside Des Ratima, I just want to say to you that our thoughts, our condolences are with you all. And this will extend also to the whānau pani, which includes Des's wife, Evelyn. Many of you would have met her and heard her beautiful voice at different occasions. Hoi anō tēnā tātai. Anei rā tātou e mihi kia koru rā me ki rā ngā rangatira e Des, koru tahi rā ko Sani. Anei rā mātou e tuku tēnei whakamoimeti kia o kōrua, ke tau mai te manaakitanga tō tātou nei kaihanga kai runga rā i a kōrua. Haere kei runga e te hurahi māro, ke tai ai koe ki te pūtahi nui rehu te pōtūtanga roa pipiri, te taka te urunga te moenga te whakareia. Anei rā mātou e noho nei i te ao i te pō, he roi matata mātou nei kai i tā koutou wehinga. Nō reira, kei ngā rangatira, haere, haere. Wai hoi a tātou nei me ki ra ngā whānau panu, e noho nei e whakaro ake kia maharake i te wā e koitea, e kōrua, kai runga ki tēnei ao. Anei re mātou e tūku tēnei whakamoimeti ki te atua, ke manaaki mai i tōna ringa kaha, kei runga ki a kōrua, kia ra haere tai ai ki te oke ngā wairua. Kia hoki mai rā ni o e tātou ngā whānau pani, taino rā kia tātou o te matawa Māui, e mihi, e tangi, e mihi, e tangi. Hoi anō e aku nei rangatira, koutou rā e matakanohi mai, a tēnā koutou, huri no tēnā tātou. Pass back to you, Chair. Thank you very much. Sorry, Chair, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Piri, for that. That was beautiful. Can I just welcome everybody to this meeting, councillors on Zoom, staff, and anybody else who's out there on the streaming service. We live in slightly challenging times with COVID-19 Delta lockdown, and I hope everybody's staying safe in their bubbles and is coping very well. If you know people who aren't, please let us know, and we'll do whatever we can to make sure we can provide them with what is necessary. It's a pretty full agenda today, so I'll make some progress on this. Any apologies? I know of no apologies. Do you know of any apologies, Leanne? No. Okay, no apologies. Notices? No notices I've been advised of. Any conflicts of interest? Anybody got conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? Being none, I'll move on to the minutes of the Regional Council meeting held on the 28th of July 2021. Would someone care to move the minutes as circulated be accepted, unless somebody's got an amendment or changes they'd like to make?
I'm happy to move, Chair.
Moved. Neil, seconder.
Happy to second, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Henry Wai. Do any issues people like to raise out of the minutes? I'll put the motion then. All those in favour of the minutes being endorsed, say aye, or raise your thumb, finger, hand, wave. Carried. Next item is follow-ups from the previous council meeting.
Matters arising, Mr. Chair.
Matters arising, I don't see that on the agenda, but I'll bow to you on this occasion, Neil.
Yes, I just wanted to know what the situation was with the Coastal Hazards Transition Plan. Did we set a date for that plan to be brought back to council? I just can't recall. You able to answer that, James?
So in the follow-ups, that item's noted as still a work in progress. So we don't have a date at this stage for that work, but there is work underway to scope the full volume of work and implications for the previously assumed timing for the delivery of a long-term plan amendment and public consultation. So we'll advise council once we're in a clearer position on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we now move to follow up some previous items of council? Item in the coastal hazards is here. We've covered that.
That's all, Chair.
Yep.
Say something.
No, I wasn't going to add anything. We're just working on a plan, and we'll bring that to council on how we'll bring those 8 items to council. So will be forthcoming shortly. Okay. Can I just make an observation from myself that the Lagoima requests being posted in the format they are helpful, informative, and I find them useful. All right. Next item on the agenda is item 5. Assembly organisational activities looking forward through September. Who would like to lead us through with this?
Chair, we'll take it as read, but perhaps I just would note for council's benefit that obviously this was drafted prior to us going into lockdown, and a number of activities currently underway by council are being impacted by the lockdown, particularly those that involve engagement with landowners and with the public. And so at this time, it's difficult for us to assess the overall impact of the disruption to our operations, given the relatively short period in which we've been in lockdown so far. But obviously, given the uncertainty around when we might return to normal business, there is likely to be some impacts that we will report to council on in due course.
Okay. Any questions that councillors might have? Who's first? Like to Craig?
Thanks, Chair. Of the update there, James, linked to my other request, item 5, outstanding water bodies appeal was closed, and there's some appeals there. I've also circulated a request that we add in another table and around major legal processes that are going through the various parties to those processes. So I wonder if you could just describe your thoughts in that space. Basically, it's just an item of interest, I'd say, to councillors and ratepayers. And if you could add anything further to number 5 there around the joint submissions, what that might mean for the ambitions of the regional council for that outstanding water bodies, how that may play out for people on the ground.
So in answer to the general question, following your useful suggestion, we have had a discussion with Katrina in relation to the policy and regulation team and also to the governance team about adding to this document on a monthly basis a rolling schedule of legal action that the council is involved in some way. And so the intention is to bring that to the next council meeting in the next significant activities report. So we'll do that, and we'll welcome feedback at that time from councillors as to whether the nature of that information and its format is useful. In relation to the outstanding water bodies, I'll pass to Katrina, and she might like to make some comment about those appeals.
Sorry, Councillor Foss, can you just repeat your question? I heard you saying something about the joint. Sorry, I missed it.
That's okay. Or James answered my general question. It's just a further comment, if any, on item 5 in the significant updates. The outstanding water bodies appeal period's closed. There's been a joint submission from some parties. So obviously it's going through process, etc. So I just wonder if you could just let us know again who those parties are and what that time frame might mean. Is that normal? Is there a delay? Is there any cost to that, or anything like that? You could just enrich us, please, and the viewers watching.
Yep, absolutely. I don't have to hand all of the parties. My understanding is that Ngāti Kahungunu are one party. I'd have to get the other parties. Sorry, not at hand. In terms of time frame, up to the court, really. We just wait.
And does that have any? It's always judicial process, and everyone's allowed to do that, obviously. But this court time's a court time. But do you have? By the way, the parties are Ngāti Kahungunu Incorporated, Tai Whenua o Hiratonga, and Forest and Bird, and the Maori Trustee.
Yes.
Any ideas how long that process might take, and then, once that's completed, how much more time that process might add to our initial ambitions?
No, ultimately no idea how long that process will take. It will be, it could, as long as a piece of string, depends on how busy the Environment Court is. I suspect they'll want us to go first and foremost to caucusing to see if we can try and resolve some matters down. But essentially the nature of the appeal, particularly from Ngāti Kahungunu and Tai Whenua, is around wanting the aquifer identified as outstanding and going back to the full list in which they submitted on through our process. So we could, and I'm more than likely directed to go to caucusing, but I have no timing at this point.
Giraffe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 4, could you just explain to me which sector groups are involved, and if any of the all of the 3 rural councillors are going to be invited to this meeting, or at least be informed about these meetings so they can attend?
So, Chair, through you, I guess the primary convener of that group, group conveners are Ian and Katrina. Ian's currently acting as the group controller at Civil Defence today, so is not with us. Katrina might be in a position. Katrina, are you in a position to list the parties?
Can you tell me which page you're looking at? Sorry, I'm busy trying to get the agenda up on my screen as well.
Page 9 of 43.
Sorry, apologies. Bear with.
4. Blame Stella. I do all the time.
Sorry, working from home is such fun. Yes, next week. So it is convened by the integrated catchment team. I'm not sure who is there. We are it's beef and lamb, Fonterra, forestry are on the top of my mind. Yeah, sorry, I could get some more details. It's not. There are no elected members as part of that meeting, is my understanding.
Well, the question Jeff asked, could you just send to him via an email a list of those people who've been invited, so it's clear? And secondly, whether it's intended that elected councillors play a role in this or not.
Yes, will do.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Jeff? Cool. All right. Let's move on. No other parts of this. So would somebody like to move that the Regional Council receives and notes the significant activities report? I can see Craig. I can see Will. All those in favour will say aye. Carried. Call for minor items. Has anybody got minor items?
Spatial planning.
Spatial planning. That's Martin. Anybody else? Last call going. All right, we've got one minor item. Let's move on to the next item then. Report and recommendations from the Maori Committee. Who's going to take us through this? Would you like to do this, Piri?
Kia ora, Chair. Mindful that I believe I saw Mike Paku and Michelle on board as co-chairs.
Okay, well, that's good.
Happy to give the report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mike, where you go?
So I think we just touched on some of Craig just touched on one in regards to the outstanding water bodies. So the outstanding water bodies for Māori, this is spreading from Wairoa right through to Central Hawke's Bay. It is a significant issue. And a lot of this is around understanding of the term significant, outstanding. Outstanding to who and what values does one use to determine outstanding? So I think it'd be fair to say iwi Māori's values are slightly different to that of the local territorial authorities and central government. And that's what's causing part of the issue. So it is water bodies that have been included as being outstanding, does not always agree with mana whenua. And it's not just about, not just a matter of about outstanding water body, it's also about the mana of that wai. And so these are the conflicts that are causing issues to the forefront. So Wairoa have raised this alongside Heretonia and of course Tamatea as well, who also have issues. So I think just that for note for our councillors. It's not just a matter of Māori wanting to put a submission in. It goes just a bit deeper than that. The constitutional options, you'll see in there, we've kind of signalled where, from a committee, we believe it should go. And I see that as part of an agenda item. So I'll leave further conversation up to that point, rather than rehash it now. The water security program update. There is issue in regards to how Māori feel about potential recharging the aquifer and how that could come about. So I would suggest further consultation, further discussion with iwi tangata, mana whenua in that space. Otherwise, we will see pushback. We will see mana whenua pushback on this, especially if we're just taking the recharge and just taking it straight into the aquifer. I think a bit of understanding around what would be a acceptable cultural practice might be helpful. I think the other thing that really came out of here was in regards to we had a presentation from the Tangaroa Tohu Mana Tangaroa Maori group given to us by Te Kaha Hawaikirangi. Hawaikirangi. So absolutely a great presentation. The committee were very appreciative of it, very informative. We could all see how much the amount of work that's required within the Moana space and the coastal area. Once again, it's about how do we work together to bring about the changes that are required. The port group that's been put together with Mana Whenua are operating very well. So big ups to Napier Port, and of course to HBRIC, who of course have got some oversight in regards to the port operations through the directors. I think the only other things that kind of, that's kind of where we got to in regards to the main issues that dropped out from the Māori committee meeting, other than the actual Māori wards and the constituencies. And if you go down to decision-making process 16, with the recommendations there that came through from the Māori committee, once again, no doubt we'll touch on those when we get to the agenda item around constitution changes. Michelle, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, unfortunately I wasn't present in the Māori committee hui for obvious reasons, but so, and I was supposed to chair. I don't know how Mike and the two co-chairs were absent. Oh, were you on Zoom, Mike? But one thing I'd like to add was the outstanding water bodies, and I just took off the screen because I went and got this. This is the Te Tira Whakiumi o Te Wairo, which was the claimant body before it became Tātou o Te Wairo. And this is the sites of significance that I mentioned to the person who was coming around and having the hui with our people. I didn't get to make it, and she called me up afterwards, the regional council staff, and there's just pages and pages of why these water bodies are significant. There's a section on the river sites, and the mappings were done with the Crown mapper, as you can see. And when we put all our sites of significance together, and he layered it and he zoomed out, the whole of the Wairo River was thick yellow with all the sites of significance. Now, I don't know how we missed out on becoming an outstanding water body when we had so much evidence. So, yeah. And I have mentioned that before, that we're disappointed. And our people did say all our water bodies are outstanding, and I take talk of that as well. So just wanted to mention that, and thank you to Matua Roger for cheering for us. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Kia ora, Chair. Just to add to both co-chairs and reflect back on parts 5, 6 and 7, which is the Water Security Program update. And just picking up on Mike's point in relation to engagement consultation at the Hapu Whānau iwi level, I can confirm that Tom Skirman and his team have quite a comprehensive engagement program that is operative at the moment, including a CIA cultural impact assessment in relation to the MA, and also quite a degree of discussion that's happening both with, coming up with Nikki, if we can secure that in the lockdown, but also with Māori and others in the Hiratonga area. Just to add, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments people would like to make?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Look, just reflecting on the kōrero just shared by Mike and Michelle, I want to ask a question in a minute, but can I just preface it with this observation as a resource management practitioner, that I really don't know how helpful it is to force people into situations where they have to rank one water body against another in terms of being outstanding. I mean, they're all important and they all need to be protected and they all need to be managed. The NPSFM says we have to identify and protect the significant values of outstanding water bodies, but just how much time and resources goes into this process. And as Michelle said, this enormous body of evidence. And really, at the end of the day, under the Kotahi plan, we should be trying to raise the bar in terms of quality on all of them. So yeah, we have to do it, but I just have a little bit of cynicism about how helpful the exercise is. My question is, in terms of 2.4 on the agenda, the Te Tai Whenua or Heretaunga disappointment that the lower Tukituki Awa was not included on the list of outstanding water bodies. I just wanted to clarify that, because at paragraph 10, the last bullet point is the Tukituki River downstream of State Highway 50 is outstanding. So am I missing something or not understanding something there?
I think that's a technical question, so I'll leave that for the officers to have the first crack at. I'm happy to give comment.
Sorry,
Trina,
Martin,
yeah,
you're saying you're disappointed that it's not included?
Oh, no. I'm just saying in the agenda, there is there's an expression of disappointment from the Tai Whenua o Heretaunga that the lower Tukituki Awa was not included, but it looked to me like it was. So I was just wanting to get some clarity around that. Paragraph 10 versus paragraph.
I see that, Martin, and I would have thought that downstream of State Highway 50 is a very large section of the Tukituki River.
Well, it's certainly the lower.
So
it would be well over half, I would have thought.
Chair, I suspect that at the front end it should probably read that it's the upper Tuki was not included, given the contradiction in the paper. Look, we'll clarify that for you and make sure that's clear in the minutes.
Well, I'm not sure that you can, because there's a report of the Tai Whenua o Heretaunga saying that they were disappointed, and that's their view of this. Then it says of the outstanding water bodies, this is the collection here. So we just need to get some clarification if there's necessary. Are we miscommunicating here, or someone miscommunicating? So I just think pick up Martin's point and get it clarified.
If I can just add, Mr. Chairman, I think it goes back to my point around the different value sets that are being applied. So Maori value sets are different to those of local territorial authorities and government. And this is where the grating between the two is starting, it actually appears. Because it's not just outstanding water bodies for Māori, it's mana, otawai. There's no difference between the mana of the upper Tukitok to the lower Tukitok. Their mana and their point of importantness to those hapu is no different as to whether it's the upper or lower. And I do take Martin's point that somebody has made this grading, and unfortunately, as a consequence, we have this differential. Hence the reason we will always suffer pushback from hapu as long as we continue down this pathway of this type of grading. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Chair, acknowledging Mike's narrative comment there. I'll pick up that clarification between 2.4 and 10 and come back to Martin. Thank you.
Sure. Well, send a note out to all councillors. I think we'd all like to know the answer. Has anybody else got any other things here? Will?
Chair, sorry, could I just respond to the point made by Councillor Williams and also by Mr. Paku? Look, and really for the public record on this, this plan change and this requirement under the National Policy Statement has been a source of great contention with Tangata Whenua since we embarked on this work. We're enormously sympathetic to the concerns held and the disconnect, I guess, between the statutory instrument and the reflection of mana for mana whenua. This has cost this council and will continue to cost the parties involved in this litigation hundreds of thousands, probably exceeding the millions. It has been questionable right from the get-go whether this is a useful policy instrument, given what we're trying to do more broadly around protecting and enhancing all freshwater bodies in the region. but it was a legal requirement that we undertake this work, and it was also a legal requirement of the Environment Court's direction from Plan Change 5 that we undertake an outstanding water bodies plan change prior to notifying any other freshwater plan changes. So we've been stuck with both government direction and court direction on this. We have been required to do this work. We've gone to great lengths to try and engage tangata whenua across the region, including providing direct resourcing for identifying those cultural elements that do need to be brought into the decision making. We ensured there was Māori representation on the independent commissioners that heard this, and we have done our level best to try and navigate what is an impossible square to circle. And I just, am apologetic to everybody that has suffered through this process and continues to suffer through, but we're simply trying to navigate what is an imperfect set of statutory instruments to try and make progress for the region around improving and protecting all of the region's freshwater bodies. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Will?
Thanks, Chair. Just a point of clarification. The paragraph 3, the Chair and Chief Executive highlighted concerns about slow progress of Council's climate change work. What was that referring to specifically?
That was me.
Was that just a general comment, or were you referring to something specific?
It was. Okay. I was just echoing concern about the IPCC report and the I thought very daunting and disturbing predictions they made about the future with climate change, and the fact that the world was charging on as if nothing was going to happen. And I was saying that we need to take this climate change issue very seriously. You've heard me make these comments before, Will. They'll come to you as no surprise. Okay, right. I'm having a bit of trouble here with my phone. So is there any other comments? Could someone like to move that the paper be, move the recommendation on the paper? The only thing I'd say here is that I think the recommendation isn't written as well as what it could be. So we receives and notes the report, and the Maori Committee recommends. Let's be cautious that there's decisions to be made here by the thing. So these are recommendations to Council for its consideration and deliberation when it makes its decisions on the paper that comes later. All right, do I have a mover and a seconder? Come on, people. I see you there, Neil. Are you happy to move?
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, very happy.
Thank you.
I think.
Oh, very good anyway. Thank you. Anybody like to speak?
Not me, Chair.
Anyway?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other comments?
Just from me,
all right.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just wish to concur and support the comments made by Chief Executive James Palmer with regards to the efforts that HBRC have made in working together with tangata whenua on this. Most of the constraints and challenges we're working through at the moment are a direct result of the pressures of time that the central government placed upon us all. Wairoa's official position is that all our water bodies are outstanding, and we objected to having to lift one above the other, as Councillor Williams indicated. However, while Tato's official position was that all water bodies are significant, we did encourage at a catchment by river level and river by river level for hapu and mana whenua to participate in the outstanding water bodies process. And so we are working with our mana whenua, and we're grateful that there may be opportunities with Ngāti Kahungunu and Te Tai Whenua to progress specific water catchments within Te Wairoa, just so that there's a understanding of our position and how we ended up where we are. Kia ora.
Thank you for that, Api. I'll just make the observation. I concur with James' view that we're trying to put a square a circle here. I have from the outset said that this was a flawed notion, allegedly flawed notion, by some politicians who wanted to look like they're doing good and protecting our waterways and making something special, but all they were doing were creating problems for all the reasons that Mike has outlined. Firstly, there are different value sets operating here, which no one quite got in their logic systems. And secondly, how do you put one water body ahead of another, and ahead of another to whom? I just saw this as being a truly fraught process, and all of my predictions are coming true on this. We're just going to go round and round and create a lot of angst and spend a lot of money for what I can see is of little benefit. All right, I put the resolution. All those in favour will say aye, or wave your hand. All right, carried. We'll move on to a report and recommendations from the Corporate and Strategic Committee. Neil, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to walk through, there are a few, if you like, issues to be raised. I just want to go to the recommendations, Mr. Chair. Recommendation. There's only one recommendation there's only one recommendation, and that's the annual interim result carry forwards. And I think there ought to have been a couple of others that we ought to have received as well. So I'd just like to go back to paragraph 2 of the paper, 2.1.1. There was a recommendation from the FARS committee which asked that the Corporate and Strategic Committee agrees to reset the baseline at 2.111 of the Risk Management Maturity Project. That should have been carried through as a recommendation into Council. So I'm suggesting that we actually do carry that through at this point. The other point I want to raise is at paragraph 7 on page 20, the annual report, interim non-financial results. There was a recommendation to receive a report at 4.2, but it ought to include or add to it, including the changes recommended by the committee. And I've got a question there. Have those changes been included and suggestions made at the committee stage been incorporated into the final report? Do we know that, James?
So can I just deal with the first issue first? So the reason why is it's not in the substantive recommendations is that the full briefing on the risk maturity has not gone to Council. So it was really, the idea was that we would get the committee's agreement to the baseline, as the FARS committee is the committee overseeing the risk maturity work, as opposed to bringing that all the way through to Council. In relation to your second question around 4.2, I can't see a 4.2, so I'm just not sure what we're talking about.
I can't see a 4.0 either. You mean
the reports received, recommendation 4, decision-making process, recommendation 4, reports received. 4.2? Can you not see that?
4.2, the annual report, interim non-financials?
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. And my question is, there are a number of suggestions to bolster the qualitative commentary around, for example, stock exclusion, life support, SBO, ecosystem prioritisation. So they were suggestions made at the committee stage. Yes. And the question is, have they been included in the final version of the report?
So the annual report's still being worked on, and the feedback from the committee has been taken on board. And so when we bring that back for both the committee and the council's adoption, those matters will be dealt with then. So yes, they have been.
So at this stage, we're only receiving an interim report, which will come back for adoption. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Yes.
So we're asking of council here is to note that the reports were provided to the committee. That's correct.
Sure. And I'm just suggesting that including the changes recommended by the committee.
That's fine.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's Mr. Chair. The substantive recommendation then is to approve the carry forwards, and that table is set out there at at recommendation 3. So it's a total of something like $13 million of carry forward, of which 3 million are operational, and there are 9 or 10 million of capital expenditures carried forward. So we'd been through those at the committee stage, and then those other reports that are that we're recommending that the council receives. The one comment I would make is going back to paragraph 5, and I don't have the benefit of the actual CNS committee meeting minutes in front of me, but there's a recommendation, there's a comment there. The committee was confident there is a robust and effective strategy in place to ensure the TLA compliance. My comment there is that we actually didn't consider a strategy. We simply looked at the summary of the compliance programs in place. So I think it's a step, just a little bit of poetic license there to suggest that we'd accepted that there was a robust and effective strategy in place when we didn't consider a strategy. So just a comment on that. But other than that, Mr. Chair, happy to move the recommendation and for consideration of council.
Okay, any questions, comments? All right, Craig?
No, Mr. Chair, the chair covered it pretty well there, and I'm happy to second it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? James, you've got your hand up.
So Chair, for those present in the meeting who weren't at the committee itself, and for the public, just to provide a little bit more detail on the $14 million of carry forwards. So over $4.5 million of that is from reserves. So it's really just changing the year in which that funding is being proposed to be spent. So they sit in our substantial reserves for things like our flood schemes, and an additional $7 million is borrowing, which is shifting from year to year. So it's borrowing which had been anticipated in the last financial year that will move forward to the current financial year. So the total quantum of ratepayer funds that were collected in the last financial year that were not spent, that's being transferred to the next year, is really only around $700,000, just to put that into context.
Thank you. I have a question. Councillor Williams noted a financial error in the chart on the carry forwards. There's a value which was inconsistent. Has the correct value been put in place in this chart here? I haven't had time to go back and check on it, but
yes, it has. So that second item in the table under 192 requested as 233,000. The incorrect number in the paper was 254, which was a transposition of the numbers. So yes, sorry, 354. Both of them have been added together in the original paper. So yes, those are the correct numbers.
Excellent memory, James. Thank you. All right, any other comments? If not, I'll put the question. Anybody else? Neil, would you like to speak to it before we put the question?
No, I'm fine, Mr. Chair.
Craig? Fine, all right. All those in favour will say aye. We'll wave.
Right.
Old-fashioned. Contrary, no. Carried. Okay, we're on to the next item, which is future of the Hawke's Bay Drinking Water Governance Joint Committee. Are you going to speak to this, James? And then I'll invite Heniwai, who's on that, to speak.
Look, I will, only so much as I haven't had a conversation with Katrina this morning about whether she'd speak to it, so I won't drop her in it, given that I've had some longer carriage with this issue. So the Hawke's Bay Drinking Water Committee was established following the Havelock North drinking water contamination event, and it was particularly in response to the issues that arose around the coordination of local authorities and the DHB as the drinking water assessors, and also involved participation at the outset from Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated. The idea was to improve the level of coordination between the councils and other agencies in relation to drinking water safety, and to respond to the recommendations of the independent inquiry established by the government into the Havelock North event. The committee has overseen, with the assistance of a joint working group of council and DHB staff, a program of improvement to the way in which the assets are managed and regulated, and all of the recommendations of the independent inquiry that related to the councils have been completed over the last few years under the auspices of this committee. The committee has also provided input into the tank plan change, particularly around source protection and the policies that are now going through the tank plan change process, and have been notified significantly strengthen the protection that we have over the Hiritonga aquifer system for the drinking water supply of Napier, Hastings, Flaxmere and Havelock North. So we're now at a point where the committee has largely fulfilled its original work, and we're transitioning back to business as usual in the provision of drinking water. But also at the same time, there is now government consultation underway in relation to significant changes to service delivery for all three waters. That's drinking water, wastewater and stormwater. And the possibility is that a joint committee of this nature could have a role in the future in overseeing the future delivery arrangements or the transition to a new delivery model as part of those three waters reforms. And so the chief executives and mayors and chair of the 5 councils of the region have recently considered the future of this committee, as indeed the committee has done so itself, and arrived at the conclusion that for now the committee can be put into abeyance while the future delivery arrangements for three waters are worked through. There may be a need to reinvigorate this committee in a different form in the future, but for now its work is largely complete. There will still need to be ongoing coordination between the joint working group of council staff and the DHB in the future, and we can propose to continue the work of that group, but that it reports directly to the Leaders Forum, which is the mayors and the chair of the regional council, and to the chief executives in the region, to ensure that we continue to get coordination and oversight of drinking water in our region. So that's the purpose of the committee. The committee was established under the Local Government Act as a joint committee, and to that end does need a decision of this council and indeed the other 4 participating councils to put the committee into abeyance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Henny White, you're connected with this committee. Would you like to say a few words, please?
Well, yes, you're quite right, James, with all those details. Just a bit of background with how the committee got to the recommendation for consideration of a disestablishment, but we now have that opportunity around abeyance, is that we looked at the review of the terms of reference for the governance committee, and we did find that, you know, all those recommendations from the inquiry and reasons for why the committee was set up had almost been completed. And so thank you to our working group who've been able to tick those off, and they still have a vital role to play. But in terms of our terms of reference, we'd pretty much got to a space of what do we do now? So with the Three Waters reform coming and the unknown roadmap of where that's going to go, I think the practical solution is for us to look at the abeyance option until we know what the region is going to do in the future around the Three Waters reform, which includes drinking water. So that's the consideration that we have today. That we look at that abeyance opportunity, which I think is a practical solution at this given time. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Anyway, I have Craig and Neil with hands up. So Craig, to you first.
Thanks, Chair. James, can I just question this a little bit? I understand from an administrative point of view why these recommendations are coming, but if we just peel back a wee bit, thousands upon thousands of Havelock North in particular residents were sick and really badly sick, and some still have, they allege, issues that whose origins are from that Havelock water crisis, 6 years ago or so now. The only tool they had to point out the gaps between the bodies they trusted to ensure they had safe drinking water pointed to incredible lack of communication, responsibility gaps, whatever. We've all seen the reports, and that's fine. So that pointed the finger, and I realised changes have been made. But then, James, you mentioned tank will be in place and has very vigilant process. Tank is not in place, and it's going to be years before it's actually in place legally. And you mentioned that for now its work's complete. Yes, I can see why you say that. But for those people who are desperately worried or quite reasonably concerned that these issues may arise again because of the shortcomings that report and therefore the formation of this committee put in place or pointed out, can you assure us that their ability to hold the various organisations to account will be at the very least maintained, reported on, and enhanced, or maybe enhanced by the move to the leadership forum that you describe? Because I haven't seen a huge amount of evidence of things moving positively once they land in the leadership forum. So can you please provide answers to that, particularly any assurance that you can give? Thank you.
Before I take Neil, I'll take James to answer the question.
So, look, I think I can give you the assurance that the accountability and oversight of the work of the councils around drinking water will continue, with direct reporting through to the mayors of the region and the chair of the regional council. At that level, we still retain a direct reporting line and a high degree of focus at the highest level of political accountability within the region. I do note that the 5 councils and the leaders of those 5 councils in the region have signed up to drinking water safety and security being one of the top priorities under the triennial agreement, and therefore a legal requirement for the 5 councils to continue to collaborate on that issue. It is every intention for the joint working group to continue. And I think the assurance we can give the community is that the findings and the recommendations of the Havelock North Drinking Water Inquiry have been adhered to. And with respect to the tank plan change, we are able to implement the source protection measures in there now that the plan has been notified, even though it's not yet operative. And we have been working with the Hastings District Council and Napier City Council to give effect to those in recent times. And part of our work in that has been the program of bore security, where there are risks to the aquifer from bores that are not appropriately maintained. So in separate recent reporting to council, you will be aware that there has been identified a significant number of non-compliance in terms of the ongoing maintenance and independent assurance around bore security across the Hiri-Tonga aquifer. And that's an example of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council taking compliance and enforcement action that it historically hadn't had the capability to do so. And so all of those potential risks to the aquifer are being actively managed and followed up. So, look, I think we're in a completely different place to where we were in 2016, and there is a high level of cooperation, and I do think the people of Havelock North, Hastings and Napier should continue to feel assured that the learnings have been taken on board, practice change has been undertaken, and we're in a much stronger position to provide assurances to our community today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Neil?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just essentially two questions, a follow-up to the question raised by Councillor Foss, and essentially what we are doing or asking in this recommendation, if, for example, to place the working group into abeyance, it means that the regional council's functions in terms of compliance rest solely and squarely with our compliance area. I wonder whether Katrina could help us with the program in place to ensure that, just in light of the previous discussions at Corporate and Strategic around what the programs look like. I wonder, Katrina, whether you can provide that assurance that we do have the framework, program and capability capacity to if you like, retain all of that compliance for the Havelock North water, or the Hastings water supply.
Katrina.
Yes, we so that was detailed in that report that came up to Corporate and Strategic in terms of the officers, and I think that's what James has referred to previous, is that all of that compliance work will continue to continue on. The leads or the managers of that group are in the Three Waters or the Drinking Water Officer group, and they will be reporting to with assistance through to Hawke's Bay leaders. Is that what you're asking?
Well, that's one additional approach and strategy that's there. That is, there's a direct, if you like, reporting line proposed. I'm assuming proposed. If the water group goes into abeyance, what is the mechanism by which, and you've suggested a direct line of communication to the leaders group. But sitting under that, I'm hoping you can give assurance to the public, particularly those in Havelock North, that we're all over this, that the old way of doing things is long gone, and that we've got the appropriate program in place that's robust and will guarantee those people clean drinking water right through. Let's be clear with the public about what that looks like for us now, as opposed to 4 years ago.
Yeah, so ultimately, as James suggested, we do have a BOR compliance program which has increased in since the Havelock North Water event. The compliance monitoring checks are annual. We have identified through that a number of non-compliance BORs. We've got compliance regarding consent conditions which are being monitored. So all of that continues on and is reported through to the officers group, that's reported through to the leaders group. It's also reported through to this council through our compliance reporting.
Could I just make the point there? Yes, I have seen, before I take James and then Charlie, the activity of the compliance group on BOR inspections. I think the point that Neil is making here is that we need to highlight that it's not just doing it for inspecting BORs, it's for a purpose, and these are the other purposes that is being done, so there's better visibility of it. James.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I just wanted to also add that alongside the changes we've made, central government have introduced the Water Services Bill Act, and they have created Taumata Arawai, which is the National Drinking Water Regulator. Taumata Arawai has picked up the staff that previously resided within the public health units of DHBs as drinking water assessors, and they have significantly strengthened their oversight of drinking water safety plans and the infrastructure. So our role is in relation to source protection and making sure that the aquifer in particular is free as possible from contaminants that may affect drinking water. Once the water comes out of the ground, it is in a pipe. that becomes the responsibility in terms of regulatory oversight of Taumata Arawai. And we continue to collaborate with them to ensure that we've got a seamless end-to-end regulatory set of arrangements. But look, overall, regulation has significantly strengthened across drinking water. And I do understand it is the intention of Taumata Arawai to publish the compliance results that they see on a regular basis as well, so the public can have visibility and assurance around drinking water safety provided by local authorities.
Thank
James,
you,
the
Charles.
consent still sits with the with a regional council, though. We issue the consent.
Yep.
Sorry. So we issue consent for the abstraction of water. That is correct. And the bit that had been missing historically was that our focus on the aquifer was around its general state and trend, not in relation to near sources of contamination that could impact on a drinking water bore, and also in terms of compliance around our general requirement for all bore owners and operators to ensure that the bore is in a fit and serviceable standard so that contaminants cannot make their way into groundwater as a result of the penetration of the surface of the land. So that's the other area where we've significantly increased our activity and oversight.
Thank you, Charles.
Just to confirm before we close down the governance group, is the source protection zones, whilst they're in the tank, are they obviously Mohaka and Wairua are just being started now on their plan changes? So have those source protection zones already been identified in the Wairua district in the upper Mohaka? And down to what level? I know as quite a few years ago, the health system identified water systems being used by communities. Have those systems identified by the District Health Board been transferred to the Regional Council and have been classified as source protection zones?
Katrina, can you answer that?
No.
So in terms of our source protection zones under the Regional Resource Management Plan for Wairoa and Mohaka, that is still work that lies ahead. It hasn't been a priority up until now because they have been they are surface water takes with very high levels of treatment associated with them. So the municipal take for Wairoa Township, for example, does come directly from the river and does periodically have contaminant loadings which would be harmful to human health without high levels of treatment. So there at the moment there is a program of treatment that is dealing with that risk. But ultimately what we would like to do in the interests of multi-barrier protection is have reduced contaminants within the drinking water source itself. And so that is work that lies ahead. But right now I just want to assure that the council and the community that the level of treatment required by Taumata Arawai for Wairoa District Council does mean that those drinking water risks are being appropriately managed.
Thank you.
Martin?
Thank you, Rick. It's more of a comment, really, and in response to some of these questions. So I'm happy to save it until perhaps anyone moved the paper, or I can do it now, whatever you prefer.
How about Henny, are you happy to move the paper?
I've just got another question, Rick.
Neil?
Just if I could, Katrina, just go to paragraph 33 of the paper, and I just guess this is relevant to decision making on 3.1 or 3.2, is just those costs of continuing the committee. I see we've got an independent chair, consultants, etc. Can you just give us a sense of what it has cost us in the past, and if we continued, what it would cost us going forward? If we, for example, if we keep going for another year with this group, what are the implications financially?
Look, I'm probably better placed to answer that than Katrina, as I've been signing off the invoices for recent years. So between the independent chair, consultancy support to the committee, and the independent representation, so meeting fees for representation from Ngāti Kahungunu, we've been looking at around $30,000 a year for the running of the committee. So those are costs which will not need to be incurred for that part of the work going forward.
Thank you for that. Enough said.
Okay, Heniwai, are you happy to move?
Happy to move. Yep.
And Martin, will you second? Sorry, will you second? Sorry, Martin, will you second? Yep. Okay. Anyway, do you want to make any comments?
Yeah, just again to congratulate the joint working group really on the mahi they've done so far, and they will continue to report back to the Regional Leaders Forum if this is the direction we end up going, and the committee, it comes back to the committee and in terms of agreeing to the abeyance option. So no, just happy to support that, and yeah, go forth the lead forum.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Just which recommendation are you looking at, Councillor Ormsby? Can you help me there? Is it 3.1 or 3.2 you're recommending?
It's both.
It's both.
It's both.
Yeah. So one's talking about the governance group, and the other's the joint working group. So it's moving both of them.
Yep.
1, 2, 3.1, 3.2.
Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I agree with Heniwai. This is a group whose job has been done at least to the point where we need to pass the baton on. I'm very cognizant of Councillor Foss's concerns over the origins of this, and Councillor Lambert's and Councillor Curtin's concerns to ensure that public safety is at the forefront for the future. But the reality is we need to get with the program here, and this conversation has moved significantly forward, and it's now time for our regional leaders to step up and put the Hawke's Bay proposition on the table. Taumata Arawai is now going to be the lead agency for setting standards that protect the safety of the constituents of our region. They're going to set those standards, and the new water entity is going to have to achieve them. I think really we're in a place now where, as I say, those regional leaders need to step up and bat strongly for Hawke's Bay. And I commend the letter that we recently sent as leaders following the Joint Collaboration Day to that end. We have a model that works, it's being tested. We've invested in that. We need to engage with central government to make sure that, with the interests of everyone we represent as local leaders in mind, we've got a model that works for Hawke's Bay, and that we partner with mana whenua in a sensible boundary alignment to ensure that 3 water services are safely and efficiently provided. That's where it lives now, and I think it more effectively lives with the leaders, bearing in mind that the working group remains in place at the technical level to keep close to the ground and provide that advice to the leaders as we enter this transition. So that's why I've seconded the paper, and I think that's where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Did you, Neil?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and very happy to support the recommendation. But what it does mean, I think we need to be quite clear that the Regional Leaders Forum is a different entity. It doesn't have the, if you like, the administrative support that that the governance group had previously, and in many respects it had carried a de facto responsibility for the administration of the water resource from start to go. So we somewhat deferred, I think, as a council to so now essentially the torch gets passed back to, in some respects, to this council. We still are the consenting authority, so therefore that responsibility falls fairly and squarely on our shoulders, notwithstanding the Te Mata Arawai connection as well. But we still carry those responsibility, and I think we need to recognise that and make sure we've got internal, if you like, capacity and direction in place, including reporting upwards to council on the in terms of compliance. And I'm sure we will do that. But very happy to support this move. And I think the lessons have been learned. We're all over this from start to finish, and this is simply just one further step on that journey to, if you like, amend a sad chapter in the region's history. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Neil. Any other speakers? I can't see any other hands up, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour, will raise a hand, wave a thumb. Yeah, we've got that's carried. Okay, I'm now conscious that we're moving on for time. We've got I've got three other decision items to be done here. On the list, we've got the regional marine oil spill, fixed and common seal, which shouldn't take long, and then there's the representation review arrangements of a separate paper. So let's move on. Let's take on the regional marine oil spill Tier 2 contingency plan for Hawke's Bay.
So, Chair, this one is should be pretty quick. We've got a responsibility under the Maritime Transport Act to prepare and have a regional marine oil spill contingency plan for Hawke's Bay, required to be reviewed every 3 years. That review commenced last year, went out for public submission. 4 submissions were received. You'll be able to see that in the paper. Changes made, and then we get approval of that plan from Maritime New Zealand, which we received on 13th of July 2021. It's now before you for council approval.
Question. It's normal for papers to go to a council committee prior to coming directly to council. Which committee did this go to?
I don't think it has.
Well, that's what I thought.
I think it's come straight to council. Sorry.
Well, it should. We have a discussion about this on several other occasions, that the council has a policy of double debate, and all papers should go to council committees for discussion, rather than so they can have time to interrogate them and then come up with a recommendation to council. So that's my first thing here. We do that in the future. Secondly, I just want to go through this paper. It says here we gave submissions between the 15th of January and the 5th of February. Is that an ideal time for seeking submissions on this? Do you think we did our best here?
I can't. It's probably not ideal. You're quite correct. I'm not sure of the reasons why we put it out for submission at that point in time. It is a plan that we consult with directly with these parties, though. So we're having conversations with all of these people as well as calling for submissions. I get that.
Yeah. Anyway, the next question I've got is on 5. It says the lessons learned during the practical exercises, but doesn't tell us what the lessons were. It would have been helpful to have had that included up.
Sorry, what that paragraph is saying is that the plan includes the requirement to include a lessons learned during practical exercises. So it's saying HBRC will undertake a practical exercise, whether that's at the port or at a river, and what they learn from those exercises they will then feed back into the plan, and there is a cyclical learning environment there. So that's the plan is about doing that, not that there are lessons to be put into the plan.
Well, that's now that you read it that way, I can see how that's read that way, but I'm reading it the other night. I thought that was lessons learned. Okay, that's okay. Any other questions on the paper? Michelle?
Oh, kia ora. So I'm just looking at the report around. I'm just a little bit concerned with the northern catchments, and I have been included in the group of Te Kaha, not that I've participated, but the Hawke's Bay Oil Wildlife Response Team. Emails, and I understand they've got a foundation course on wildlife response for a spill, but and it's mentioned of endangered birds and wetlands in our district and their significance, but also I think it needs to be also noted that it will have a significant impact on our mahinga koi resources. But my suggestion would be, I don't know, I suppose this is the forum, if there can be something coordinated between Peter Manson with the regional council and our the mana moana here. So Rongo Wahine down, we need to have some sort of voluntary team that are trained in this locally, you know, because it sounds like from that report that we won't be prepared, and that can have devastating impacts for us, especially with us being so really isolated. So yes, just a suggestion or recommendation. I'm reading that report for our people.
Cool. Thanks, Michelle. So can you make a note of that, please, Katrina, and see if we can build some contacts and liaison with Wairoa to have some prior preparation and planning put in place?
Yes, yeah, sure.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right. I'm happy to move the report. Do I have a seconder? Jeff? I don't wish to speak. Do you wish to speak, Jeff? Any other speakers? All right. All those in favour of adopting the report, raise a hand, a thumb. Carried. The next is the fixing the common seal. I'm happy to carry on the responsibility for moving this substantive recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Jeff, thank you. The old team again. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour will say aye. Oh, sorry, wave a hand. I'm just two things. All right, carried. Let's now come to the last remaining decision item, which is representation review arrangements. Now, I don't have the run sheet in front of me, but disorganised today. So what time did we have scheduled for lunch? Can someone tell me?
1 p.m.
Okay, right. Well, let's move on. So representation review arrangements. This is the special paper. You'll have this in your pack here. So who's going to lead us through with this one? James?
Look, this was traversed reasonably extensively with council previously, so I won't go through the paper line by line, and Leanne, who of course is the author, is available to answer any questions. There have been some additional matters dealt with in the paper that were not in the previous council saw, particularly from the conversation that arose. There's some commentary in relation to if there be 3 rural councillors in one large constituency outside of Nathan and Hastings. So that commentary is provided. And I think all of the issues that were raised by council have been addressed in some way in the paper. So we can probably move to questions and then decision making. Leanne, was there anything you wanted to add?
Thanks, James. Just one thing, and that is an error in the recommendations that I just picked up this morning, and it was just a result of my copying and pasting. In 3 point, sorry, I'm just going to find it. 3.4 and 3.5, the number is correct, but the word was 2. So the word needs to match the number. So I've made that correction, and that was all. So if anybody has any other questions.
I just looked at the number. I never saw the 2. Saw the 3. Okay, questions. Who wants to start? Or do you want to have a sort of a general round of commentary? Martin, where you go?
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify, at the corporate and strategic meeting, we were looking at, in terms of extending the Wairoa district or constituency boundary, we were looking at a figure of 5,127 electors. Now it's 5,691. It's paragraph 31. Am I reading it correctly that there has been a slightly greater area brought in with the Mohaka Wairoa constituency under this paper than there was at the corporate and strategic, but specifically moving the boundary? If you look at that figure, difficult when you're doing this by Zoom. At page 17 of the agenda paper, it now aligns directly with the Ahuriri Napier constituency boundary, whereas previously it was a little bit further up relative to the Esk River. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Williams. We, in looking at the boundary again, we took it to the other side of the river, so including the Esk Valley itself, which previously the boundary was on just on the north side of the Esk River. So if we were going to take a part of the Esk Valley, I thought it made more sense to take the whole of the valley on both sides of the river and the road.
Can I just ask Councillor, Deputy Chair, to take up for me briefly, please?
Now, of course, if Council's desire is to put that back, that's easily done, and we can go with what was originally decided.
Is that answer satisfactory?
So yeah, sorry, no, I didn't have any issue with it. Chair, I was just wanting to make sure everyone was clear about that.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Councillor Foss.
Thanks, Chair. Bear with me. I've got quite a few questions, probably comments after. So, Leanne or James, could you just remind us, and for the record, the principles you used to decide the boundaries that you have suggested there in the recommendations? Because I'm not quite clear on what those principles are and the way they've been consistently applied. Thanks very much for considering my option of potentially looking at another way to try and make the numbers work. I think we need to note again, we're having this discussion, which is a direct consequence of our earlier decision to have 1, maybe 2 Māori wards, and obviously we're tending towards 2. No problem with that whatsoever. But at the moment that decision was made, some harder decisions obviously had to come into play. And when about 5,000 or 6,000 voters in Wairoa who are on the Māori roll, obviously will be on that roll, therefore 5,000, 6,000 less on the general roll in Wairoa, we have the challenges in front of us now. And I don't for a moment say they're easy decisions, but they are a direct consequence of, and we should have been prepared for them when those earlier decisions were made, or at least canvassed. So in my mind, all Hawke's Bay voters are equal, although the recommendations make some more equal than others, and I'm not at all comfortable with that. So the principles that you've asked, and then if you could explain in 33, so again, thanks very much for considering, and you put some numbers together for a potentially at-large seat, kind of a rural seat. If you could just talk a bit further about the risks. You say there, you explore this option, but the risks associated with this model are considered greater than the potential benefits. Could you please explain what those risks are? And then I'd like to come back, please, Chair.
Okay.
Leanne, do you want to have a go at that?
Certainly. So the starting point for the representation review is always looking to identify the communities of interest, which Council has done on the previous 3 occasions, I suppose. So that's where I started with. Those being the communities surrounding the main urban areas, the rural community, which is represented by Ngārororo at the moment. And that's where we start. Then we look at the numbers to determine whether that we can provide effective representation for all of the electors of the region, bearing in mind that communities of interest are catered for and not unnecessarily combined or split or otherwise changed. So when we look at that, we start looking at the numbers, and the principle of fairness is guided by the Local Electoral Act, which says that if all being fair and equal, that the number of people that each councillor represents should be about the same or within plus or minus 10% of the average. And we have a look at the boundaries and how we might be able to shift those in order to achieve that number. Now, the further considerations when we're talking about those numbers are that we look at also the total number of councillors. So it may be that a regional council can have between 6 and 14 members. And one of the things that we would look at is whether increasing the number of councillors could bring those numbers back into line within the plus or minus 10%. Now, when it comes to the plus or minus 10%, we do, as a regional council, we are, I suppose, allowed to apply for an exemption. And that is where we haven't been able to reconfigure the boundaries such that we can meet those requirements without either combining communities of interest that have nothing in common or splitting communities of interest that should remain together. And I suppose that's where I could leave it, if that has answered your questions, Councillor Foss? Or
not really, but specifically para 33, if you just expand on the risks. So you've looked at an idea I had, you've played with some numbers, but have not followed through, I presume, because the risks associated with it. So what are those risks?
So the risks associated with that aren't actually why we didn't continue with that, although they are there. One is that because of the nature of the urban communities within that larger constituency, that most of the population for that one rural constituency is on the Heratonga Plains. And so that if everybody voted, there could be a disproportionate representation of people elected by that specific population base. Another one is that because of the geographical spread and the size of that constituency, it'd be very difficult for people to actually represent that community because of the distances that you'd have to travel, the access of voters to their representatives, and going to things like community meetings, those types of things. But in the end, that option doesn't meet the plus or minus 10% threshold. And the way to get an exemption is to justify that it's necessary for a community of interest to be retained. And I can't think of how we would justify a community of interest that is a combination of a lot of different communities of interest. So does that explain where we got to with looking at that?
Well, it explains what you were thinking about. Yep, that's fine. Thank you. So and did you apply that or look at our current representation arrangements? So for example, it's called democracy if a very large area has quite a few people in one particular area and they vote for 2 or 3 people from that area. That's actually democracy. They may be the best candidate or the most meritorious candidate, may be of an outlying small population area. That's the nature of democracy. I just cannot understand why we keep worrying about the worry in this thing. And the reason I asked about the principles, we've bent over backwards to try and find the right mix subject to consultation for the 2 Māori seats. And we seem to have landed in a pretty good space, I think, for everyone. There's roughly 12 to 15,000 voters in both of the proposed Māori wards. I mean, that's absolutely fine. In the proposed wara, in the recommendations that are proposed, there are per elector 5,600 in the Mohaka Wara ward. In the Ahuriri Napier ward, there are just under 18,000. So when you talk about fairness, I don't think it's fair for the people of Ahuriri or Napier, where they're essentially 3 of them equals 1 in Wara Mohaka. Now, I'm incredibly supportive of Wara and the hinterland and etc. But first and foremost, I start with democracy, and it's all about numbers. And your first criteria, as you note in para 34, I think it is around population equality. Then you go for these dispensations, etc. I mean, it's just how it plays out, and you know, I won't put you in the spot, but I think Hastings, for example, was incredibly well represented around this table. But interestingly, neither of the 2 current Hastings councillors live in the Hastings ward, and neither do either of the 2 candidates running for the vacancy, but it's still very well representative. So you can't guess this stuff. It's just simple numbers, and the numbers we have given to us come down from our decision earlier to progress to Māori wards. Absolutely fine. And our general decision or preference of 11 total councillors, absolutely fine. I just think we have to have a harder look at this, not just tinker around. The environment doesn't care about these lines on the map. I could argue where I live out at Waimarama, my area of interest, well, the most significant environmental issue we've had for the last 10 years was up the coast when we had the April 2011 floods and storms and inundations, etc. So we could go right up the coast. My point is we're not looking at other ways to best represent our region, we're simply tinkering around. And I think this is forcing an issue for us to, I think, to have a harder look at the representation or the lines on the map. I realise I think I'm in a minority around our table. I respect everyone else's view, but I think at the very least, all voters across Hawke's Bay are equal, give or take 10%, and we've achieved it on the new Māori seats or wards, and we're trying to achieve it. It's tough, but we just have to make some calls. And even as history shows, sitting councillors have moved seats. A couple of elections ago, I think Councillor Bevan, I think was Hastings and then moved to Naroro or something like that along the road. Sorry, I've got that wrong. He was always out there. But you see my point? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so I just think you just sit to the numbers. The quality of those that are elected or around the table is the quality of representation they'll give to their area and region. If it's a very large area, well, that's maybe we should better recompense those who are driving around to council-related events, etc. That's another question, but it doesn't mean we should sacrifice fairness in one area for another. So I think I've made my point. I'll rest there. Thanks, Chair, and we'll see how we go.
Good. I would like to call Councillor Ormsby.
Good, Chair. Thank you. Thanks, Leanne. Just a few questions, and I'll pick up with what Craig was discussing. Can you reiterate for us what the Electoral Commission deems as communities of interest? Is it just about the rural-urban split, or are there other communities of interest that you haven't touched on yet?
Sorry, Councillor Ormsby. Yes, no, it's more than just rural or urban split. A community of interest is people that have an interest in common, really. And there's no specific definition in the legislation. However, I'm just trying to find where I go back to from the Local Government Commission. And they say that a community of interest is a sense of belonging to an area or a locality, a functional, so that's where the community, ability of the community to meet its requirements for services. So that's what they talk about, TLA wards or TLAs as a whole, and political. So the ability to represent the interests and reconcile the conflicts of that community. And when we think about the fairness of representation, it's more about the people that are being represented, are they able to access their representatives? Are they able to get to community meetings and those types of things, rather than, and I know that you can't help but actually take the representative themselves into account because of the distances they may have to travel, but really it's more around those constituents. Are they able to access their representative easily or within reason? So does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Leanne. Another question I have is it required upon us to hear submissions? And it says in the table around our timeline, the 13th of October. Mm-hmm. Is that absolutely necessary that we hear submissions? I know we'd like to, but if we're in a COVID situation, is there flexibility around hearing submissions?
I will have to double check to make sure that it is a requirement, but as far as I'm aware, there is the requirement to provide the opportunity for people to be heard if they want to be heard. And so if it turned out that we were in a such situation like what we are today, we would probably organise for those hearings to be on a Zoom meeting like we have today. And I'm not sure, but we'd have to see whatever is possible to organise to make it possible for those people to be heard.
Thanks, Liam.
All right. Yeah. So submissions are coming to forms. Firstly, written, and then we'd be able to, if people want to be heard, we'd hear them, and we'd hear them in the circumstances which were permissible and workable on the time. What else have we got? Councillor Ormsby. All right. Thanks, anyway. See Councillor Foley. Will?
Oh, Councillor Van Bake's been up for a lot longer than me.
Oh, has he? Okay, you're Councillor Van Bake.
I appreciate your courtesy, Councillor Foley. It's actually a question that we actually asked last time when we discussed this, but we never got around to actually asking Charlie, because I'm actually in the same boat, or was in the same boat. It's actually really difficult when you actually have a large constituency to cover. And we were going to ask Charles what he thought of a even larger constituency than he has already got. So I think we should post that to him now and see what he thinks, if it would be unwieldy, the size that we actually have, we could be including in his electorate.
Sure. Charles, would you like to comment?
Yeah, why not? I'm sure we had a good discussion last time, and we sort of come up with some recommendations about where we're at. But firstly, yeah, I think Wairau obviously is where I'm representing currently. But the reality is that Wairau is a small ward, and a lot of their people actually live in the Bay. It would be a shame that the constituent, the Wairau people that live in the Bay, finally have an opportunity to behave as tangata whenua and represent their region, but we might be putting them inside another boundary. But I'm sort of, I guess that's just what happens in this electoral system. We call it democracy, but it's actually we put fences up. Currently, I think Wairau has an exemption now because the population that voted for me is vastly different from what's happening in Napier with the Napier constituents already. So I think that one large, I listened to the reasons that Leanne put up for having one large boundary, and it's probably correct. You know, you'd love to get someone travelling right across the whole expanse of Hawke's Bay to represent people. So for that reason alone, it might be better just to divide it into two. But it's, and for me, just calling it north and south will do it. You can't hope to invent two more tribal lines. That's just not what we're doing here. We're just giving two more seats for voters to put in. The fact that it creates an anomaly in the general election is we just got to make a decision and move on. We all knew that the two seats is not a fair representation of what iwi wanted. It's just what's available right now. And I think there's still a lot of water to go under the bridge before this is covered off anywhere near what iwi reps would want. But it's a start. It's definitely a start. So thanks, Leanne. I listened to all your reasons, and you've got a big job, and you've put it into a space where we can at least look at it. So thanks very much.
Good up. Okay, I'll go to Will, then I'll have Api, followed by Martin.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a question probably for Councillor Van Bake, Councillor Lambert, or perhaps Michelle. So when we go back to I don't think it's in this paper, in the previous paper, it spoke of historically the Central Hawke's Bay ward was increased in size back in 2007 to try and work with this plus or minus 10% rule. So what it did is it shifted the boundary closer to Hastings, except those people that lived close to Hastings but now became part of the Central Hawke's Bay ward didn't really agree with that. And so in 2013, they changed it back. So my question to those three, just simply because I don't know the area and the boundary change that's proposed, is the risk that the same thing happens here, that the boundaries move south and those people align more with, you know, the Hastings Rural Ward rather than Wairoa?
I'm not sure how we can answer that. Leanne or James, would you like to have a go?
So I would say that is actually a risk, that the people that we have added into the Wairoa constituency may not actually feel any sort of connection to the rest of the area. And in the end, we would have to defer to whatever decision the local electoral commission, the local government commission would make on that. And of course, if council so chose, they could actually change my recommendation here and revert to the Wairoa constituency boundaries that we've had in the past, based on an application with the very same criteria that was granted in the past. I'm not certain which way that would go, but that is an option for the council.
Sorry, that's with a 50% less base population, so your chances of succeeding are probably 50% less.
Probably. Okay, thank you. Api.
I was just going to respond to that, Mr. Chair, that question from Will Foley.
Yeah, sure.
I think it was you who made the joke that when you were in Wairoa or somewhere in that district and you asked where is a good place to eat, and they said BP Bayview. I think there is a risk that we have people in the Mohaka area and a few others that actually feel more aligned to the Heretaunga Plains rather than Wairoa. But I think that's just the way it is. The numbers are such between Wairoa and the Heretaunga Plains, there's just very few people there to make up the numbers. And I think we will risk, and I think, Will, you're right, we will get some pushback that some of those people don't feel aligned with a seat called Wairoa rather than being part of Ngāruaroa. Thank you.
Okay. Api?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I have more of a comment than a question, so if you wanted me to refrain from making my comment until after the motion is put, I'd be quite happy to.
Oh, well, we're well learning the art here of how to turn a question into a comment.
It's not particularly a skill I've refined for myself. So,
well, you can try this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I'll take the opportunity, first of all, to acknowledge the complexities that are going to continue to evolve from out of this process. And that's fundamentally for us as Māori around the difference between the ability to participate and what representation might look like. So I'll acknowledge, first of all, that we've been fraught with challenges to get to this position and this recommendation around Māori representation. And for iwi particularly, this was about having the ability to represent our whakaaro on the board, which is made complex by the need to provide or achieve confidence around the Local Employment Act and the Local Government Act around representation in the plus and minus 10%. So fundamentally, as Māori, we don't necessarily see ourselves well mirrored or well catered within the democratic system. We operate to a different system. And so that's really around where these conflicts are going to continue to need to be interpreted. We're not immediately aligned either with regards to territories or lines on a map, even as our council colleagues are talking about the complexities of numbers versus boundaries. Iwi are having those same conversations around the conglomeration of takiwā in the two catchments that have been put forward in the recommendations. So no matter what we do here, we're going to find some challenges that we'll have to overcome. This is not a system that Maori designed, and so it not immediately fits or aligns with the way we operate or the takiwā in which we operate in. And so nonetheless, we are focused on the positive, and that's the opportunity to have a formal seat at the table and have the representation and views of Māoris reflected formally in the votes of council. And so that's still a massive step forward as far as Māoridom is concerned. The nuts and bolts around representation are the same for us. We have many questions from an iwi perspective, but we are going to continue to struggle so long as we try to find solutions within this framework that wasn't really designed for our two separate political structures to be able to work cohesively together. So nonetheless, all the parties remain forward focused and looking at trying to build what we can do within the catchments that we have in order to best represent those people within our catchments. But most of all for Māori, there's a very different ideological position between representation and where our residents sit, or what role they're on, what territory they're in. And so we will continue to work progressively with council and our staff to try and navigate through these tricky places. But nonetheless, I just wanted to take that opportunity to point out that while we have talked at length with staff and amongst ourselves as iwi around the two catchment model. For us, it was a choice between a lame horse and a blind horse. Neither is going to win the race, but they're still in the race. So there are flaws and challenges with either. And so, yes, a one catchment approach means a hugely resource-intensive approach to try and maintain some communication within the residents across all of Te Mātua Māori. And vice versa, breaking it into two catchments presents different challenges for iwi, which I know Councillor Lambert has spoken on before. By way of example, Wairoa has 9,000 people living on the roll within the rohe, but collectively, our Māori organisations between Rongamai Wāhine, Te Wairoa, Ngāti Pāhau Wera, Ruapani and Waikaremoana, those numbers of Māori who affiliate to those groups far exceeds the number who actually live within the rohe. And so some of us do live a little bit further south of the Mohaka, and some north, some east and some west. So it's never going to be an easy challenge. And we are still nonetheless focused on trying to make the best solution out of these challenging variables so that we can get good representation and good participation, particularly because that's what this is about, enabling participation in the decisions of council going forward. So I hope I didn't confuse the issue any further there, and I hope I was able to clarify that while we also share some of the concerns of councillors around the way the Act and this representation requires us to divide our communities, that's not necessarily, like council, that's not necessarily how we as Māori would love to have been able to participate in this space. But we think the recommendations that have landed on the table are in the best interests of participation and democracy with HBRC and the current state that we're in. So that may change over time, and we'd welcome that conversation too. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. I can see Martin's hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I just got a question about the process, and I guess coming back to risk. It might help if Leanne just reminded us in general what the criteria for an exemption are, and I know there are things like communities of interest and practicability and territorial boundaries, but it doesn't seem that Craig's one of what's best for the environment is that. But I guess that could be part of the answer to my real question is what happens, we go through this whole public process, there's even the potential for appeals. How confident are you that at the end of that, the Local Government Commission is actually going to approve what's being recommended in this paper, Leanne, based on the answers we've had last time? What's your gut call on that? Are we going to get this home after putting this our public through this, do you think, in the shape that's being recommended? I guess that is the nub of my question. And what happens if they don't?
So I can't 100% say that the Local Government Commission will agree with us, and I don't know that the public will either. So the reasons why we've been granted exemptions in the past are based around communities of interest and also the geography and distances involved in the region. So, for instance, Narororo was created, if you like, ahead of the, I think, the 2016 elections, because the proposal that the council put forward was to have a north-south split for the Hastings constituency, and the Hastings District Council submitted that they felt that the representation should look more like what they had with their rural community board. So that's how Narororo came about. And that was a decision that the commission made, I guess you could say, against what council had proposed, because they felt that it provided for better representation of that rural community surrounding the Hastings urban area. The particular challenges around the Wairau constituency were around geography, and the fact that you've got mountains and rivers forming a natural boundary along the edge of that, and that you couldn't really jump over those to contribute to that community. Yes, and the council will have the opportunity to make changes to that proposal if the majority of submitters come back and say, hey, no, we think that you really need to change this in line with what we suggest. So does that's sufficient answer?
If I might help, James, you go.
I just confirming Leanne's final point is noted in the chat in there that yes, this is a proposal. It's not final decisions. We've got to hear from submitters, but ultimately the elections themselves will not be in any way delayed or impacted by this decision. The Electoral Commission will make a decision, come what may, and impose that on all of us, even if it's a different proposal or different decision to what's proposed by council.
That's exactly right. So what we do is we make a recommendation after having considered all of the options thoughtfully, consulted on it, and listened to all of the representations from our communities thoughtfully. And on the basis of that distillation, we will then forward our recommendation to the Electoral Commission. They will look at it, hear it, and at the end, they will make a decision for which there is no appeal from our perspective. And when they set the boundaries will be election for the next council will be run on the boundaries the Commission sets. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I was just wanting to get a sense before we put our communities through that Leanne and James are confident that this stacks up, it's got merit, and it's it could get there at the end of the day. That was all.
So I think it's in terms of whether it stacks up, this is just a heck of a balancing act, and obviously the legislation's trying to achieve two different things at cross purposes. One is equitable representation, and the other is representation of individual communities of interest. And our geography and our demography as a region just don't easily enable those two competing objectives to be reconciled. So it's a grand balancing act of kind of suboptimal circumstances. And I think, based on what's presented to you and the issues that you have all collectively raised over recent weeks, we've got as close as possible to a balanced compromise to take to the community for consultation.
I'm going to just take one more question. I think that's Henry. Why you've still got your hand up? Is that you? Sorry, Charles, you've got your hand up.
Yeah.
I'll take Charlie. Then we're going to have a break for lunch.
Just quickly.
Hopefully, the food in the belly will make us even think faster. Charles.
Just quickly to go back to what Will asked or us is that, I think this is about the Maori seats, and I don't know if we should be thinking about tinkering with the other electorates. I know there was a call a couple of trienniums ago with those south of the Mohawk River wanted to join the Hastings district because the rates are cheaper down there. So I think we start playing around with the other electorates. You will start reaching into our territorial authorities realm, and people will start trying to look for other ways to move the boundaries. And maybe it's not such a good idea to mess with them. I think it is what it is. Things are changing, and Waira does need its own representation. And so, for your information, the Hastings district goes up to the Waikari River. And actually, Ngāti Pāhuwera, we actually sit on the Hastings Rural Board as well, because we look at extending our influence down towards Napier as our historical tribal area, as well as going towards Waitangi. So, yeah, so let's, I think we should just take the advice that's been given, and also the recommendations put forward by the RPC and the Māori Committee. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Right. I think it's a good time to break for lunch here. So we'll reconvene at 1:35. you'd like to make a few comments, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah, no, just on the I hear all the kōrero on the general constituencies. I just want to put my couple of notes in on the Māori constituency. So just having a quick discussion with Charlie as he'd understand the area and how vast it is. And there is, I did the calculations last month, is 281,304 extra hectares in the northern seat for Māori constituencies, and it's a vast area you're incorporating, and I understand why. But just so it's noted, like there's 5 PhDs, 3 iwi, possibly 4 iwi, and 4 TLAs. So the person who was elected to that seat has a huge area to cover, and a lot of marae, iwi, PhDs, TLAs to answer to, and as well as their own constituents. So yeah, just like I think if there was any recommendation, I'd be saying that I really agree with the Ngāti Roro boundary kapai that our people suggested. The other thing it would be, I think there needs to be a resourcing of a vehicle for that particular seat, because that's a big ask. That's a big ask. It's a lot of marae. It's a lot of people you've got to meet with, and there's only one person. So that's my only comment, if I could put that forward.
Thanks, Michelle. I think we've had a pretty good roundhouse on this, so I'm looking for a mover and a seconder of the recommendation, and note that Craig has indicated he would prefer it to be split into recommendations 1 to 5, 6 and 7 be taken separately. I'm quite happy to do that. Easy enough to do. And anyway.
But if that's the way we're going to proceed, I'm happy to move 1 to 5, Chair.
And what about 6 and 7?
I wonder if we move all of those, Councillor Ormsby, but take them separately as in terms of vote. Would that be?
I'd prefer to do that. So moved 1 to 7 by Councillor Ormsby, seconded Neil Curtin, with the understanding that it'll be a vote on 1 to 5 and 6 and 7 will be taken separately. Okay. So I think we've had a good roundhouse on there, but is there any final comments people would like to make? I'll start with you, Councillor Ormsby.
Just to say, this has been a process that we've gone to probably since May last year, really kicking off with the inclusion of Māori constituencies, and that I'm really encouraged by the inclusion of bilingual in the general wards is something that's different. But yeah, and that we have 2 constituencies. We've heard from the Māori Committee and RPC on the preference of 2 Māori constituencies. Although there have been benefits that we've heard for the 1 Māori constituency, it seems that the majority of Tangas Whenua reps would prefer the 2 Māori constituencies. I can fully understand trying to get to the plus and minus 10% of representation for our general wards, and that it's not an exact or precise way of representation, but we have to work within the confines that the Act allows. So in that, I'm happy to move those 7, but I understand we're taking them in chunks. But for now, I think this has been a long road. We've trodden it a few times, and we're getting to a place where we could be confident to go out to the public. Kia ora.
All right, Neil.
Kia ora, and just echoing Councillor Ormsby's words on this. This has been a tremendous journey and a historical one. This is actually, despite our previous meetings and ruminations on it, this is actually where the rubber hits the road. We've got locked it down in terms of detail, and just delighted to see Maori representation. Probably had a different view on one or two constituency, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there'll be two Maori representatives voting around the table, which is a tremendous and historical event for the region. So I'm just delighted about that. In terms of the boundary adjustments that have fallen out of that, the mechanics of this, my sense of it, having sat through several commission determinations previously, I think it's got a very strong chance of succeeding as we're looking to resolve now. I'm certain that the Wairoa Mohaka constituency will stand, and I very much look forward to the public input into it. But I think all around we've got a really good compromise in terms of representation, and taking into account the difference that we see in the Wairoa constituency, counterbalanced, I think, to some extent by the geographic spread that's involved, and the location of a Māori representative in addition to the single representative in that zone. So just very pleased that we've got to this point, and it's an historic day.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, well, I'll just make a few comments before I hand back to Henewise if she had any final comments, to say that we have got a number of real pressures here. We could have got the balance better had we have increased the numbers of councillors and increased them significantly. But my estimation is that the public would be uncomfortable with that. Two is additional 2 Māori seats of what we spoke about, and 2 of what we got, and I think people expected 11, so we had to make that fit. Councillor Foss makes a valid point that there should be balance in this, but counterpoise against that is the notion of representation. Wairoa has been underdone for quite some time with numbers. I remember joking to a previous chair from Wairoa that whilst he obtained approximately a quarter of the votes that I did, he had 2 voters, votes in favour of getting here, as I did. He had 2 votes because he was the chair and had a casting vote. So I said it makes you 8 times more influential around this council table than me. Anyway, he said that was a very fair thing for Wairoa. It's only appropriate. But despite all the disproportionality, it kind of worked. It's good that Central Hawke's Bay, also underdone, has its voice around the table as Wairoa, and it's about representation and about people being able to see that their area is represented in the regional council. I really do welcome the addition of 2 Māori seats. I think it's historic, something long overdue, and something I've been pretty passionate about for a long time, as people are aware. So I think this is a good day. As to the Representation Commission, we can just make them our best recommendation. As unbalanced as it might appear on some circumstances, it does appear balanced through another lens. And I think it will be pretty well received by the public and by them as well. So, Councillor Ormsby.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And yeah, just really delighted that we're moving in this direction. It's significant and, dare I say, outstanding change to the status quo. So thank you. I'd like to proceed. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll put all resolutions 1 to 5. All those who support those, please raise a hand. Carried. I'll now put those in favour of resolutions 6 and 7. All those in favour of resolution 6 and 7, raise a hand. Those against? It's carried.
Can I have that noted, please, Chair?
I can noted that Councillor Foss was voted against.
6 and 7.
6 and 7. Okay, up the corks, let's move on and have a celebration. Next one is the item on here. Let's get back to my agenda. We've done that. We're on to Council's reports, item 12. Is that correct, Leanne? I've got that right? Okay.
Yes.
Any reports people want to make on these items here? Being no reports, we'll move on to item 13, and as I understand, we've got one minor item, and that's Martin. Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much. Well, look, yeah, just the matter of spatial planning, which I've raised before, and a plug for the regional leaders to pick it up and make sure that it's at the forefront of our agenda. I guess my prompt for raising it at this point is the Napier spatial picture, which has been released for consultation, and I do commend it to you all as something that you may wish to become involved with or look at as an exemplar. What essentially it has done is that it has mapped, the constraints around growth, geotechnical and hazard, and what have you. It has looked at opportunities for where we might accommodate the number of houses that we're going to need in the next 50 years, which is about 150 a year. And really looked at our goals. So it's a combination of constraints, opportunities, and goals. And it has revealed, for example, as a goal that we would like to see, well, the spatial plan suggests Kennedy Road and Gloucester Street has a multimodal transport corridor, and looking at ways of getting connection between the parts of the city west and east of that, building in what are called, so I might even try and share screen this and do something a bit different for, if you look at this, I don't know if you can see this, but looking at what they call blue and green transport connections, which I was quite excited about wearing my transport hat. So if I just bring that up, if you'll bear with me, you can see on this picture here, there are these green arrows, which is really looking about getting the linkages either side of Kennedy Road so that the city is better connected. But really, I think we need to think about this and use this as an exemplar of what we need at regional level to link decisions about planning and funding with our aspiration, which is really to consider what type of region do we actually want to be, and how are we actually going to get there. This is clearly coming with the Spatial Planning Act as part of resource management system reform. But we need to be thinking as a region, how big do we want to get in terms of population, or how large is the population going to be? What infrastructure are we going to need for that? That's social infrastructure, schooling and what have you, and hospitals and health, as well as physical infrastructure. We've got our regional water study going on, and it's a matter of how much water we will need as a region in terms of demand and decisions around allocation. We need to consider what constraints we're facing, and we're looking at taking on coastal hazards as a regional council. So they're presenting very real constraints in terms of managed retreat and how are we going to accommodate people that do retreat and where. We've got issues of liquefaction, we've got flooding and inundation, we've got the very real constraints surrounding the Heretaunga Plains and the need to sustain the productive capacity of those versatile soils. So we'll need to make decisions about where the number of people we think will or should live here will live, and zone that accordingly. Equally, we need to think about where people work and where new industrial land would need to be accommodated and new commercial land. And then equally, and this is my transport hat again, how do we connect all of those people What do we do in terms of cycleway connections, multimodal connections, public transport, rail, roading, whatever it might be, to ensure that this all holds together. And I guess more importantly, how do we do this within an aspiration to be a net zero carbon region by 2050? Now, I say we need to get this thinking underway. The HPUD's review is overdue. Everything, including our Kotahi plan and future combined plans, the way we deal with coastal hazards, the way we deal with water allocation, all of that hinges on understanding the big picture, and we just currently do not have one. So look at that picture you've got in front of you there. That shows you what a spatial plan for Hawke's Bay might look like and the types of considerations that it could involve. And I just really think that we need to get on with it. So thank you very much, Chair. That's my picture.
Well, thank you very much for that, Martin. James, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. So just following on from that, so we recently had a meeting of the planning teams of the 5 councils in the region around a regional spatial strategy. That followed on from direction from the chief executives and the leaders forum that there was enthusiasm about undertaking such an exercise. The outcome of which is that it was agreed that the regional council should take leadership role in convening and driving that process. We've got a bit of weaving together to do with the very items that Councillor Williams has just highlighted, as well as a notified district plan in the case of Central Hawke's Bay, a recently made operative district plan in Hastings, and a district planning process that needs to commence in Wairoa. So different parts of the region at different stages. So the trick in this is how to weave it all together. So the current work that our policy and planning team are doing is working through what a process to build a regional spatial plan would look like and how that would work in alongside Kotahi. So very much on the table. We're simultaneously engaging with the Ministry for the Environment about Hawke's Bay being a pilot for the new combined planned and regional spatial strategies under the Natural and Built Environment and Strategic Planning bills that are coming forward to Parliament. And I understand that the Minister and the Ministry will be formally calling for expressions of interest around pilots that would have central government resourcing assistance in September. And we are in discussions with officials at the moment around what the criteria will be for selecting such a regional spatial strategy. The regional sector group, which is the chairs and chief executives of regional councils, are meeting next Friday. There's a paper going up on that agenda that proposes that the regional council sector put forward some pilots, and Hawke's Bay is at the top of that list on the paper that's been drafted. So we're very much on board with the suggestion of Councillor Williams, and we're keen to take that forward. But obviously, before any work commences, we need to bring back to Council, and particularly our Regional Planning Committee, an analysis of scope, resourcing implications for Kotahi, etc. So some decisions can be made. But essentially, we believe that this can be done as part of Kotahi, and probably needs to be done as part of Kotahi, particularly with the legislative reform being undertaken. And there is at this stage this to collaborate by our territorial authority partners.
Okay, thank you. This is a non-debatable item. I see Councillor Curtin has his hand up. I'll entertain 30 seconds. We need to move on.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment to James. My view is that, please Martin raised this, is that this really does need a governance involvement. And for example, on the Napier's proposal, I would like to see a part of that planning coming back, James, that there is provision made for governance to governance engagement. It's a high level strategic thing, and we ought to be engaged rather than coming in at a very late stage. So that's my appeal to achieve that level of collaboration at that level.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to assure Council, that absolutely there will be full governance oversight of this. And one of the things we have to work through, which is a complexity in all of this, is that the RPC Act 2015 confers specific responsibilities around the preparation and the oversight of the preparation of regional policy statement and regional resource management plan, regional coastal environment plan with the RPC and in our co-governance model, and how we weave that into the governance of the other councils as well as something that's yet to be worked through.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you, team. That's been a very productive meeting. We've passed some pretty historic resolutions, particularly the one about the elections and about the seats. A big step down the way, and some other very important things. So it's been a good day. We're now going to close the meeting, and I'll ask Pierre to help us with this. And for all of those watching, I just hope that you continue to be vigilant, stay safe. I see that the report today has that the number of cases recorded in New Zealand is still rising, not as fast as they could be, but still rising. And we're doing okay here in Hawke's Bay, but we don't want that to change. We just need to be careful. So stay safe, stay home, stay in your bubble, and take all the necessary health precautions.
Point of order, Chair.
Yeah.
I think we cannot close the meeting just yet. We need to go into excluded for a few items, and then come out and then close.
Oh, do we? Yeah, we do too. Exactly right. Oh, see. This is what happens when
I'm here to help you.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. I'll accept your motion for moving to public excluded. And who's going to second it? Councillor Lambert. Procedural motion. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry. Thumbs up. Hands wave it. Aye. Carried. Meeting's now put into public excluded.